All right, welcome. Welcome to the Parish Catalyst Communications and Technology webinar. And welcome from around the country and Canada. You're joining us from over 100 locations around the country and Canada. We know many of those locations you're with teams, so there's a lot of us coming together today to learn and to plan and dream together about how we can better connect and communicate with people for the kingdom. Before we get started, I want to just go over a few things with you. First, if you're not familiar with Parish Catalyst, I want to give you a little idea of who we are and what we do. We are a nonprofit, Catholic nonprofit based out of Los Angeles, California. And our vision, our dream, our desire is to help people, to specifically Catholic leaders, to connect with each other and to encourage them to think creatively, to act courageously, and renew the church. And I say connect with each other because we do this through learning communities where Catholic leaders come together, about 10 parishes at a time, and learn together, plan together, share strategies, best practices, and truly in a community setting, grow together as the church to renew the church. So we'll talk a little bit more about those learning communities later. I also want to let you know how this is going to work on a technology end from your view. On your screen there, you'll see a chat button and a Q&A button. The chat button is where we'll post links and resources for you that we're going to talk about throughout the webinar. So that's not a place for you to chat, that's a place for us to chat with you. But then the Q&A button is a place for you to share your questions with us, and we will answer those at the end of the webinar. So without any further, I will go ahead and just start with this idea of communication, with our vision for communication, and where does it come from? A big picture, a really big picture view of communication, where do we start? And I want to ask you, do you have a vision for communication at your parish? Do you ask yourselves, why do we communicate? And does your staff start from that mindset of thinking before they just put information out there, why am I communicating this? What's the reason behind it? What's the vision behind it? And the big vision starts at the very beginning. And we read that in the beginning, God created. And we see this story where God communicates through visuals, through creation, through an audible voice, through language, through eventually the written word. And we know that Jesus is the Word. And so we want to start by just remembering and reminding our staff and our teams that we were created in the image of a created and a communicating God. And that's what inspires and drives and guides our communication, is that truth, that even God's creation communicates who He is visually in an inspiring way. God communicates who He is to His people through all that He has created. And then, as I said, the purpose of communication for our parishes is connecting people. We got to remember that word connecting is so important, because it's not just about information, it's about connecting. And I'll just walk through some ways that we connect people. Through communication, we connect people to other people. This is where people find small groups and find community, find accompaniment in their journey of faith. We connect people to experiences. This could be anything from a mission trip to a worship experience, an encounter with God. We connect them to experiences that shape and really become the story of their life. We connect people to ideas. This is an advertisement for Alpha. But we connect them to ideas and help them wrestle with questions and find answers for questions. And our communication does that. It does so much more than just give information. It connects people to ideas. And lastly, communication connects people to God. And that's our end goal. And what we're doing in parishes is we're hopefully connecting people to God and the God that created them for relationship, and that they communicate with that God in a relationship with Him. I want you to remember through this that connecting people is more important than sharing information. And as I asked earlier, do you have a vision for communication at your parish? If the vision is just sharing information, getting as much information out there as we can, information about ministries, information about Mass, information about spiritual formation, religious education, sacraments, it's not necessarily connecting with people just because we're putting information out. So when we have this value of connecting people above just sharing information, then we have a way to measure the success of our communication beyond just output of information. I love this quote from John Maxwell. He says, "Great communication always begins with a commitment to someone else." And if we remember that, as we communicate, we are committed to helping people connect with God. It shapes how we communicate, and it shapes the investment that we put in our communication, how well we communicate. So just remember this, and we'll discuss this later. This will be in the worksheet that we're going to share with you. Do you have a vision and values for communication at your parish? And does your staff know why and how to communicate with the parish through the different avenues of communication that you use? Without any further ado, I'm going to get to our first presenter. He is Dan Rogers. He's Creative Director of Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And Dan is somebody that we've known and been working with for a while. He's helped us in big ways define the reason we exist, the reason that we communicate with you. And he's just fantastic at helping people get to the heart of communications. This was recorded earlier, and we're going to share it now via video, about a 20-minute conversation with Dan Rogers. And then we'll come back and we'll be connecting with Merrick Siebenaler, and he's the Director of Marketing and Communications at St. Monica's Parish. He's going to talk to us specifically about parish life and really get into the more specifics of parish communication. So let's look now at our conversation with Dan Rogers. Thank you, Dan, for joining us today from LA. And I want to just jump right into it. A lot of folks watching us today, they don't have a dedicated communications person at their parish. You probably know some stats on that. What are some suggestions you have for parishes just for foundational communications when it's a shared responsibility throughout the staff?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. So I would say when I worked at a parish staff, I was the communications person. But before I got there, everybody on the team sort of took a shared responsibility. So, let's say the director of religious education, they're writing bulletin announcements. And then the youth minister is coming up with pulpit announcements and social media and things like that. So in most parishes, everybody is sort of sharing the responsibility of communications. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that if everybody has a baseline understanding of what we're communicating and how we should communicate it, I think it's very beneficial for everyone to kind of be on the same team. And so one point I want to say, this is the number one piece of advice that I give to parishes when I work with them, is always to think about your audience. It's very, very important. And if you could leave, I know we're just getting started, but if you leave with one thing, I would say keep in mind the audience you're trying to communicate with. And you might be thinking right now, okay, I'm in a parish. We all are welcome. We want everyone to come. We want everybody to get excited about the gospel. And that is true. But the way in which we engage certain demographics of people will dictate the way we should communicate them. Going back to this idea of understanding the audience, we need to know what will make somebody interact. Okay. And like I said, with young people, it's about engagement and it's about feeling a sense of belonging. Oftentimes in parish communications, we think of the bulletin, and someone or a father has probably said, keep this as short as possible, or a pulpit announcement. And so people go up on the pulpit and they say, okay, we're having a picnic. It's at 2:00. Bring food, meet Debbie in the back. We'll see you there. And they think, oh, this is effective. I got the facts out really carefully, really easily. But when you think like the audience, well, people in the pew, they've just gone through Mass, right? And think of families, they may have had a squirming kid or things like that. And they're thinking about getting to brunch. Sad to say, they're ready to leave at some point. People need to hear something that catches their attention. One time I was at a parish and they were talking about a marriage encounter retreat for newly married couples. And they did it before and after. We did like an experiment to see. And the first time they went up there and they said, come to the retreat. It's going to be after Mass. It's, talk to so-and-so in the back. All are welcome. It was very simple and generic. Then another time they had a married couple come up after Mass and they said, we just got married a year ago and it's been tough. And instantly everybody was looking at bulletins, looking at their phone, grabbing their bags. Everybody looked up at the front of the audience and they said, if you've recently been married too, that it's the biggest gift, but it can also be really challenging. We have experienced this and we have found so much benefit in coming to this retreat. It's really simple. We'd love to have you there. You can feel a sense of community. We'll be in the back to talk to you. The difference between those two announcements, and these are the same for social media, your bulletin, if you think about what will make somebody respond, this emotional, what are the greater questions people are looking to have answered in life? Belonging, they want to be a part of a community, they want to feel safe, they want to feel love. That second announcement where the couple got up there and spoke very clearly was powerful because it connected with people, and especially newly married people. Like me, and I looked up really fast and I listened and I said, oh man, they get it. And I wanted to go versus just the facts. Again, so knowing your audience, they knew that young couples would respond to that because they could relate, versus going up with a megaphone and saying, here are the facts, see you there. I think that's probably a pretty good example of what it looks like.
So yeah, I hear you saying that storytelling is powerful, even if it's just brief. That empathetic communication that connects with where people are at. I think sometimes we reduce the gospel to bullet points or doctrine to bullet points instead of telling the beautiful story that connects with people. So as we talk about spreading this across, responsibilities, and I think to your point, maybe it's good if you're writing an announcement or putting something in the bulletin about young marrieds and reaching out to one of them and asking them to help you write it, or a young adult or a youth, so that the person communicating it actually knows the audience personally, because that's who they are. Any suggestions you have for keeping consistency when a lot of different people are doing communication, like for setting guidelines? I talked earlier in this webinar about a mission statement for communications, which I think is a good start. Anything else real practically for helping keep things consistent?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, especially with people with various degrees of knowledge and communication. So the youth minister is often the de facto communications person because they use social media and they know young people. So, build the communication. What happens when they're sick, or what happens when maybe they're a little bit older and they don't have experience with social media? And I think that's a great question. I would say knowing your audience, it maybe just a couple of bullet points on your desk. And I'm a big strengths finder guy. And when I worked at a parish, we would all have our strengths right in front of us on our desk. And so whenever you look down, you would see them. And so if you went ahead and made that little mission statement on communications, why are we communicating? I would put a couple of bullet points that no matter what we do, we need to make sure that we incorporate those. And number one, like I said, is knowing your audience. Number two would be committing to clarity. And so how this works a little bit is our brains are moving organisms, right? They're working hard and they're burning calories as we're encountering things in our daily life. And so if you'll notice, the messages and the advertisements that are most attractive to you and to me are short and concise ones that your brain knows exactly what's going on. The difference between reading a paragraph of text and seeing a one-liner is very important because your brain can see it and latch onto it very quickly. And so committing to clarity is very, very important. And that means having a main idea, short and concise. Is there a call to action, next steps, things like that. And so this is going to be in tension a little bit of wanting to do the bullet points, but also knowing that we need to use storytelling. And so the third point I would say is tell stories. And just what you said, John, I think that is such an important thing. People, especially in faith, in trying to get people into a relationship with God, they need to see it modeled. And the best way to model things is storytelling. And so when Jesus, was communicating the truth of God the Father and his love to farmers in first century. He was using stories and images and symbolism of wheat and fields and birds and all of these farming things so that people could understand. So he was telling a story in their language. And I think the same thing is really true for us in parish communications. If we can at least commit to trying to think like a storyteller, how do we really, put something forward here that people are going to want to encounter, and they're going to feel like they're going into something bigger? I think that that's an important one. So knowing the audience, nice and short, concise, clarity, and no matter where you're at in the bulletin, even if you have a book, there's some books that are just filled with long sentences. Committing to clarity helps our brains respond. And the last one is really storytelling. And I'll add one more. Authenticity, I think, is also crucial. So if people need to know that whoever's speaking these announcements cares about them. And that, again, goes back to this idea that humans want to connect. They want to be heard. They want to be loved. And it's very important. So no matter where you're at in terms of your skills, and if everybody, I would say, if you're a youth minister, your pastor, your director of religious education, the people in the front office, when they're writing little announcements and things, if everybody's thinking about audience, clarity, story, and authenticity, I think that we would have some better communications. And I think ultimately people will respond. And that, like you said, testing, I'm a big believer in testing, so like John, like you said, if you want to see if a young person comes to something, ask a couple of young people, would you come to this? Why or why not? Does this resonate with you? Does this respond? And if they say no, don't be offended. Just think this could be the ticket to get more people to come and hopefully to encounter Christ.
That's great. Thank you. And I think you're also saying that good communication takes a little bit of investment of time. Not a ton of time, but enough time to stop, think about what we're doing, not just get it done to get it off your plate and move on to something else. And I don't think that idea of being concise and telling stories is at odds with each other. I think like a young marrieds ad, like that announcement you said, could be as simple as, marriage is hard. We found hope and encouragement through the Young Marrieds group on Thursday nights. We think you might find it there too. We'd love for you to join us. How long does that take? But it still, instead of just information, gives a little bit of a story. Let's jump right in. We're limited on time here a little bit. Let's jump right into websites.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big need with parishes around the country, especially as I look at websites. So when we talk about a website designing or revamping a website, what would be the first thing that you would ask? And I think I know it's similar to what you said before about announcements. What's the first thing that you would keep in mind?
Yeah, it's knowing the audience. I think when I worked at a parish, the number one thing we always used to say is who is coming on our website. And there was this notion that it was normal parishioners a lot of times. The people that come to Mass every Sunday are constantly checking the website to see all the great new events and things like that. Well, I don't want to burst your bubble, but that's not happening. Most people are getting your text messages, your emails, your bulletin. That's how your normal, Sunday and daily Mass people are seeing all of the things going on through the bulletin most of the time. And so they're not going on your website all the time. And we used to think, every day, let's make the parish website the homepage. The pastor once told me, he said, we should encourage people to make the parish website, let's do it. That poses a couple of issues. Number one, it always has to be fresh and updated. And unless you have a person that is constantly updating your website every single day with all of the latest and greatest information, then it's going to be pretty tricky, and it's going to look outdated, and it's going to look unprofessional very fast. Second, we used to put Catholic news on our website. And there are a lot of other great websites out there that do a better job of news, and it's a lot less work than you having to put it up there every day. So again, clarity. How can we make it clear? But I would say the biggest, and this goes right into this idea of the audience. So who is the audience and what are they looking for? Most people go to your parish website to find out what time Mass is, what time a holy day of obligation Mass is, confession, or how to enroll their kids into some kind of programs. So knowing those facts and details, I wish I had a study to show you about exactly how many people. I know at our parish, most of the times, I think we had, 5,000 people, let's say, given a month on our website. 2,500 of them were going to Mass times. That was just at the parish that I worked at. And so I think it's probably true with a lot of parishes. They need to know how they can get to Mass. And intention with this, again, is, you could just put the mass times at the first thing people see. But intention to this, we want to say, how can we tell a story to invite people? So if one audience segment is people that are already ready to go to mass and they're just looking for a time, the other large audience segment are people that have left the church, fallen away, or have never been to a Catholic parish. And I would say it's a safer bet to build your website, to write your messaging, to think about them first. Okay. So one of the things I like to think about is like a parish is like a window in and out of your website. Is like a window in and out of your parish, right? So people that are coming to your parish website, I always like to think, they haven't been to mass in a long time. They're going to go on there. And most of the time, most parishes, I don't have a scientific number to prove this, I would say 90% of parishes have a big picture of the outside of their church, or a statue, or a stained glass window, or a picture of the altar, or a picture of an empty church. That's not welcoming at all. It doesn't make me want to go there. It doesn't make people that have fallen away from the church and have doubts and they don't feel like they can fit in. It doesn't make them want to go to your parish. You need to think about ways that you can incorporate pictures of real people smiling, even a few people, showing the life and the vibrancy. And so people are looking in through this window of your website and they're asking themselves, am I going to fit in here? Is this parish warm? Is this parish welcoming? Does this parish celebrate the sacraments reverently? Is there something for me in this parish? And it's very, very important to think about that. And most people don't want to, I hear all the time, let's just use stock photos. Don't use stock photos. You need to show real people. A lot of times I also hear, well, we don't have a release. We can't show people. Find a few people, find a couple families, do a photo shoot. Get them to sign a quick, simple release. Hire a professional photographer for $200 if you work at a parish in your community to come and get some pictures, even if they're just people standing outside of your parish smiling, vibrantly smiling, a diverse group of people. That will pay dividends in the amount of emotion that your audience feels when they go on your website. And again, go to any large, successful Protestant or non-denominational parish or church in your area, look on their website. There's pictures of worship. There's pictures of people. It's rich and it's vibrant and it's welcoming through those pictures. And so I think it's very important for us as a parish website to think about the audience. A lot of times, again, the megaphone is, here's our address, here's the mass times, here's a picture on the outside, so when you pass by, you won't miss it, right? Like that's sort of like the bullet points. But if we start to tell a story, our parish is welcoming. We're happy for you to be here. Been away from the church for a while. We would love to have you and to welcome you. Words and language and picture like that really, really encourages people to want to take that scary next step. And I think it's important for us to realize that for people that have left the faith, it's not always an intellectual decision. We think, they don't agree with the doctrine, so they've left. It's not that black and white. A lot of people, studies have shown, have left the faith because they don't feel welcome, because they feel like the parishioners are judgmental, and because they don't feel like they get anything out of it. And while some of those may kind of be shaky, I think it's important that we can tell an opposite story, that our parish is excited for you to be here. Catholic, not Catholic, whoever you are, we're happy that you're here. If we can just think like that in the pictures and the words and the ways that we do things, I think we'll have a lot of success with people feeling welcome.
Yeah, I think you're so right, especially with the imagery of what we typically see when we go to these sites. And, if they can hire a professional, that's great. If not, I bet there's a young adult in your parish that has a camera and loves photography that would be excited to be able to use their gift to help make the website better. They probably have some good ideas for you as well. But just some pictures of people makes all the difference in the world. Let's also talk about simplicity and complexity and what we see when we look at the landing page of a site, that sort of thing. Tell us your philosophy on that.
Yeah, I want to go back real fast about the photographer. At the parish I worked at, we had kind of a media ministry, and you'll see a lot of bigger churches. This is very popular, especially with our Protestant brothers and sisters. They have a whole ministry of these media people. We did a couple pulpit announcements, and we asked for volunteers to take pictures, and we got 5 photographers that signed up. Most of them were wedding photographers as full-time, but they wanted to give back to the parish, and maybe they didn't want to teach CCD or something like that. but they wanted to use their talents, their skills, the gifts God's had given them to do things. And so we had just, every Sunday they would go to events and stuff and take pictures and just email them. And I was the director of communications, and we post these pictures. So we always had a flow and a lot of good content. So I just want to encourage you, you got to ask. The worst thing people are going to do is say no. And I guarantee there's a few people, like you said, John, that will say yes. In terms of websites and simplicity, again, our brains, especially online with pop-up ads and social media pop-ups and all these things, our brains want clear, concise messages. We want to be able to see something and be able to respond to it. And so when we're designing our website, there are a lot of good companies out there that make websites, and they've kind of baked in this this mentality of how do we make it simple. I like to see things like new here, click here, or welcome, click here. With our menus, it's important to think about what is a necessity on our website. So do we need to have, a ministry page for each ministry? And some of your ministers will say, yes, we need our own page. And you have to make a decision to say, are people going to interact with this? And if they do, are they going to be able to respond? And so some of the best parish websites I've seen have been simple. They're mobile friendly, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But they're easy to interact with. And again, think like an audience member. Don't think like an insider. An insider is saying, okay, what time is the Holy Obligation Mass on Sunday the 23rd? Or, you know what I mean? People, it's very particular. Most people are coming almost like window shopping, where they're, oh, this place looks warm. This place looks welcoming. I found this is how I get my child baptized. This is how I get married, things like that. And so they want to interact with it. Now, going to mobile responsiveness, and what that means basically is if you've ever been on a website and you resize your window, all of the content changes to fit the size of the window. So traditionally on a desktop computer, the window is this big. So all the information is spread out. But on a phone, when you've gone on a website, it doesn't make the text smaller. It sort of rearranges the text so it's easier to interact with. That's called mobile responsiveness. So there's an easy way to check. You can Google mobile responsive test and put your parish website in there. I would say right now, if your parish website is not mobile responsive, you're missing out on hundreds of people interacting with your website. Google is actively, hear me, penalizing your website because it is not fit for a smartphone. And therefore, it's going lower on search engines. I would say the biggest investment right now, if you don't have a mobile responsive website, is getting one. And there's plenty of companies that are affordable. eCatholic, as being one of them, a very, very good one. For very low cost, you can get a new parish website that's clean, it's easy, it's very effective to use, and it looks great on a phone. So I would say make sure your website is mobile friendly. You can also go on your mobile phone and check and say, what do I need to know? And again, this is all about how do we get people to interact and ultimately become engaged with your parish. All of these things are just a tool to getting them in the doors. A lot of people have told me, and they've thought, well, we just want to inform. We want to inform people. We just want to show them the information. But if people are just sitting at home reading your website and not coming to your parish, that's a very small part of the faith. This incarnational faith that is saying, we need to come together on Sundays to be together with the sacraments. This is, the sacraments are for us, basically, and God has given them as a gift. And so all of these things need to point to interaction, engagement, and ultimately getting people to come to your parish and encounter God. And so all of these things, audience, clarity, storytelling, your website, the photos on your website, they should all be pointing very, very directly and intentionally towards how do we help people grow deeper in their faith and interact with the church and with Jesus.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to go back to the mobile thing that we were talking about, because you and I were discussing this earlier. It's 63%, an average of 63% of your website visitors are on a mobile device. So I would even say mobile responsiveness is the industry term. I would say mobile first. I would say your site should be designed for mobile more than desktop or laptop, because the majority of your viewers are going to be looking at it on mobile. And as I do weekend experience assessments with parishes, the first place I start is with their website, because that's where a visitor is going to go first. And oftentimes when I show them their website on a mobile device, they gasp because they've never even seen it on a mobile device. And it's so uninviting and confusing. I would just agree with you, Dan. If you invest in anything right away, invest in making it look good on mobile, inspiring pictures, not going to cost you a lot of money to do that, and keep it simple. What would you say, Dan? Like maybe 4 or 5 menu items across the top and not like 12?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you can, oftentimes there is a lot of information, especially enrolling in the sacraments and programming and things like that. Think about how can you consolidate some of them onto a single page, right? So if it's an engage with our parish or become involved, maybe you could have sections on there for young people. And the parish that I worked at, we built the pages like that so that, you think of how can we condense the information to make it more user-friendly. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a set number, but as simple as possible. What is the simplest way we can get the information across while telling a story, I would say.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think even the little time we've had here, it's just been rich and great information that parishes can utilize right away. So thank you for your time, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
You bet. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, I just want to review some of Dan's key points there that he shared with us. And those are to know your audience. Think about who you're communicating to for specific communication pieces. Think about who you are trying to connect with it. Be concise and be clear. You don't need a whole paragraph. Just a few lines can connect better than tons of information that people just get lost in. Be inspiring, use storytelling. And you can do that in a concise way in communicating the why behind what you're inviting people to, not just the information, the how or the when. And then lastly, authenticity. Communicate with authenticity, with empathy towards people. And I think even the photography we talked about, rather than using stock photography, even if it's someone taking some pictures around your parish with an iPhone, pictures of real people in your parish are going to connect with people more than stock photography. And I think those real pictures communicate authenticity, that we're real people here. I think if I narrowed Dan's thoughts down to one thing, it would be this: inspiration over information. Think about how to inspire people towards what you're inviting them to, more than just giving them the information. Dan's web tips for the website, first was be visitor friendly. Think about who's coming to your site. I would say most people visiting your site are looking to check out your parish. That's how they visit first now, is through your website. Use images of people like we talked about. Keep it simple. And think about how it looks on mobile. Over half of your people are going to be looking at your website on a mobile device. I just want to look at a few great websites quickly. This is Church of Nativity in Timonium, Maryland. This is Father Michael White, you're probably familiar with through Rebuilt. But see how it is very, speaks directly to visitors. It's very welcoming. It's very simple. Directions, information, and even how you can stream their services live. This is a Protestant church in Texas, but you can see very clearly there, plan your visit, very welcoming. There's a statement of mission and vision attached to it, and images of people. And if you drop down on the box there on getting connected, that's where you'll find information about ministries, sacraments, membership. All those things are under that. Not every one of them is listed individually across the top. This is a church, Church of the Incarnation. And I wanted to include this one because if you want something more traditional, but that still has a human feel to it, rather than just images of buildings and stained glass and statues, here's an image that's very traditional, but speaks in a very inspiring way. And also this yellow bar they have there, that's something that is always updated with whatever is important seasonally. So during Advent, they actually make their entire website black and white to communicate simplicity and preparation. They do it during Lent also. And then they'll have, that bar will change to information about Advent events, information about Christmas Mass, where when you land on the website, it's the first thing that you see is whatever is happening seasonally there at the parish. If you want to connect with Dan, you can connect with him here through Avenue Creative. But also, he just texted me while we were on here and said he has a new website, churchmandan.com. That's churchmandan.com. Gotta love that. And you can connect with him there. He consults, he helps parishes work in web and all kinds of communication, and also social media. That's one thing he didn't touch on, and I just want to hit briefly here, some social media tips. You know, there's so many different ways to connect through social media. It can be overwhelming. I want to give you some basic tips for social media to use it effectively at your parish. The first one is focus on the most common platform for your people. And most likely that's going to be Facebook. It's also the most robust. It has, you can post events there. You can do live, like we're doing right now. We're streaming live on Facebook. Facebook is probably the one where you reach the most people and you will have the most flexibility in how you use it. Secondly is create a schedule for your communication through social media. So just take a calendar and say, hey, on Mondays, we're going to ask people how we can pray for them for the week. Tuesdays, we're going to highlight a ministry at our parish. Wednesdays, we're going to tell people about coming events. And you don't have to do it every day. You could do it three days a week. But don't just post information. Also post things that inspire people, that communicate your vision and your mission. Use this as a chance to help people understand the vision of your parish and shape your culture through social media. Be consistent. Do it, like I said, a few times a week. Doesn't have to be every day, but just be consistent with your posting. Don't post a bunch for like a week and then just disappear for 2 weeks. People are going to follow you if you're consistent. And then lastly, engage people. Maybe once a week, ask questions. See if they have any questions about doctrine or theology or things that they'd like to learn about. But also ask them questions like, what are some of your family's favorite Advent traditions or Christmas traditions? Let people interact with your page and then respond to them. Make it a conversation. So those are just some basic tips for having successful social media for your parish. Before we go further and connect with Merrick, I want to hand it off to Flip Sanchez, our executive director, who is coming to us from Los Angeles, California. And Flip's going to tell you about some of the things that we are offering other than webinars.
Sure. Well, first, I just wanted to thank all the participants today and welcome you to our webinar. I was scrolling through the list of participants, and we have some of the great parishes across the country and even a few from Canada participating today. So we are grateful to be able to offer this to you today. But, you know, the webinars are really just a small part of what we do. We also do on-site workshops, and probably our premier offering is what we call a learning community, like John mentioned. And a learning community is simply a community of parishes that learn together, plan together, and grow together. And what we do is we provide a unique process for pastors and staffs to come together. We call it a process because it's not a one-time conference. They meet 4 times over a 2-year period. And they'll hear from great speakers. They'll do a lot of work, a lot of collaboration together, and they really plan and create the future of their parish. And you know, it's a unique process, but we've started to see some results. We're actually working on an impact report right now, and I'm excited to share some of that with you. Can you see it on the screen there, John?
Yep, looks great.
Yeah, so this is just some of the parishes we've worked with, or says who we've worked with. 65 parishes across the country in 21 different states, both clergy and lay leaders. And some of our parishes are multicultural, and some of them have just one single culture. Did it skip to the next slide? No. There it is. And the most exciting part, our results. So 73% of the parishes we've worked with have reported more young adults in leadership. 91% have seen growth in discipleship development. 74% have more small group involvement. And probably the one we're most proud of is 93% of the parishes we've worked with through our learning communities report an increase in evangelization. So if you are interested at all in growing your parish in a unique and proven way, give us a call. I will share my contact information on the screen here, and you can also find more information on our website. So we have plenty more to get to today, so I'm going to hand it back over to John so he can let you hear from Merrick.
Great, thanks, Flip. And as Flip mentioned, we also have on-site workshops where we come to your parish and help you with hospitality, help you with creating small groups and raising up small group leaders, help you with developing volunteers. And then I also do something, it's called a weekend experience assessment, where we come in as visitors and start with your website. We do a full website review, and then evaluate everything from your signage, your parking, your greeters, your welcome experience, the Mass itself, and we give you a report on where we think you could improve in connecting with visitors and guests at your parish. So check all that out on our website, parishcatalyst.org. We're going to go now to Merrick Siebenaler. Did I do better that time, Merrick?
Yes, much, thanks.
Well, when your last name is Poitevent like mine, you're always excited to talk to somebody who has a more difficult last name than you. Merrick is the director of communication and marketing at St. Monica Catholic Community in Santa Monica, California. And thank you for joining us today. Merrick's going to share with us some of the processes they've been working through with communication. But first, tell me, before you get into that, tell us a little bit about the title. How did you land on that title of communications and marketing, marketing communications? What's the why behind that?
The title, my predecessor was the director of communications, but sort of calling back to Dan's philosophy, Dan Rogers' philosophy, marketing is really about delivering specific content, exactly what people want to receive, when they want to receive it, and telling that story. So I felt that it was important that leadership and administration understood that it is inspiration as much as it is information. And so that extra connotation sets the bar high for what we have to do on the parish level.
Great. Well, I know you got a presentation for us.
I do.
Take off with that now.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I've spent some quality time with the Parish Catalyst folks, and I'm in love. And they've inspired me to do some fantastic things. So I'm glad to share them with you today. I'm going to go ahead and slide my presentation over here for you. We're good to go. So yes, the name of my parish is St. Monica in Santa Monica, California. And we kind of talked about marketing communications, and we're going to put it into practice now, what it looks like on the ground at a parish. Now we have this lovely bulletin from Lord knows when. And back then, the then versus now, I'm sure we had the bulletin, the pulpit. Occasionally, maybe we would send a newsletter, a seasonal mailing, some banners, postage, signage. Maybe we're still doing all of those things still, right? Phone tree, someone mentioned a long time ago. Those are all still viable. But now we have to add to that list all of these channels, which I know that you're familiar with. Social media, right? Email, website. But look at when these channels came into fruition. Email's only about 22 years old. It seems like it's been around our entire lives, but it's because it's so ubiquitous and essential. Websites have only been around for about 21 years old. That's when they became mainstream. Social media, it's in its adolescence. 13 years for Facebook, 11 years in Twitter, 7 years Insta and Instagram, that is, that's what the kids call it these days. And 6 years Snapchat has been around. And of course we know that we should be on these channels, right? But like Dan pointed out, sometimes it's very difficult to deploy. And so often we'll grab that youth minister and say, hey, can you post something on Facebook? So when I landed at St. Monica, so if you do all of the math, if you make a big list, there's about 126 substantial channels by which we could inspire and inform. That's a lot to manage. When I landed at St. Monica about 2 years ago, St. Monica was great. It's a vibrant parish. It longs to set itself up for the future. It's always looking forward. But the bulletin and the website were the central work product. And probably 3, 4, 5 times a day, someone would come to my desk and say, hey, can we post this on Facebook? Hey, can we post this on Twitter? Hey, I need a flyer for this, da, 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 da. And I would spend so much time just asking questions about all of the individual tasks and individual marketing pieces and individual channels that it became incredibly overwhelming. And I had to come up with a system where people could utilize all of the channels that are in place at St. Monica and still have it be one person pulling that trigger. So like I just mentioned, the central work product was the website and the bulletin. And so often in our parishes, right, this is our central work product, but what happens? I call it Control V syndrome. Control V is the keyboard shortcut for pasting. So we're just cutting and pasting blurbs that are in the bulletin and then just posting them on social media, or just taking those call to actions and cutting and pasting them and putting them on Twitter. And it becomes monotonous for not only your staff and your ministers, because they should be ministering, not writing bulletin blurbs, but it also becomes monotonous. And I think that our parishioners become a little weary, and they deserve to be inspired. They don't deserve to sort of come for Eucharist and have this bait and switch where we're hounding them with invitation after invitation, after fundraiser, after, So what is this new strategy, this multi-channel strategy, and how can we embrace all of those channels and in a manageable way? And calling back to what Dan mentioned about building a team, yes, not all parishes are going to be fortunate enough to be able to hire a full-time communications director, but even as a full-time communications director, it's still essential that you build a team and those people buy into inspiring rather than informing the entire staff and the entire parish. Because I've never been a part of Knights of Columbus. So in order to tell that story effectively, we really need to tap into people that are active in that ministry, not just the communications director who hasn't experienced it. So rather than working from a blank canvas and starting from scratch and being like a journalist and collecting all of this experience and this inspiration, it's important that that parishioners and ministers know how to deliver content to me, to the communications director, to whoever is in charge of publishing their story and their message through those channels. So what that looks like at St. Monica is called a deliverables grid. It's not a very inspired title, but it's concise and it makes clear what the goal is: to deliver content to people through all of these different channels. This is what our deliverables grid looks like at St. Monica. you can, I'm going to turn on my little spotlight here. You can see that it's divided into channels. So this is the print channel, of course, the bulletin and some full page ads, some flyers. I love acronyms, you know, CCD, RCIA, KOC, FPA. So full page ad is that acronym. The digital sphere, not social media because that has its own sphere, but the digital sphere. Obviously, the website is our largest digital channel, but also we have a digital signage system. So we have 60-inch screens in all of the rooms and throughout campus, and we can push announcements, flyers, stories, schedules through those channels, and it kind of rotates. It's fantastic. Social media gets its own sphere. Physical signage, that's a huge component of hospitality, being able to be clear and consistent with signage. It's not okay to handwrite an arrow and use some blue tape and put it on a door and says, you know, safeguard the children training here. I kind of, it's contradictory, right? Events are a channel as much as they are a point of engagement. So we could spend quite a few webinars talking about why events are so important in the nonprofit world and specifically for parishes. But you know, we want our parishioners to engage with our parish outside of Sunday Mass just as much as they show up for Sunday Eucharist. Email marketing platforms. I know that we're probably all familiar with like Constant Contact and MailChimp, but do we have anyone that's an actual expert in email marketing channels? That's important because there's so much information on the back end that you can learn from and talk about knowing your audience and targeting and segmenting on that email platform so that it's not a blast. It's no longer acceptable to send an email to 14,000 people, the same email to 14,000 people, and on a regular basis. It's not hospitable. And then this is just a list of everything that you might need for your event or your initiative. So are you going to have a program? Is there going to be a worship aid? Are you going to hand out a prayer card? Let's think about all of those things at one time. That way we don't keep coming back to the communications team every other day asking for something new. And why is this important? As I've been describing, it's a single pass efficient workflow. We sit down and in one or maybe two conversations, we're able to tackle the entire campaign, and everyone has a role to do. Let's see, I've lost control of the PowerPoint. So I'll just do it there. It makes clear the timeline and what your marketing communications capacity is. You know, if you ask something, if you need something the second week of December, sorry, too late. So we have a liturgical calendar, and we have maybe an academic calendar, and we have a fiscal calendar, and of course we have the calendar of our archdiocese or our diocese. So we need to make sure that the requests for all of these materials and all of that work happens with enough lead time. And if we do it the same way consistently every single time, year over year, we can look at what was successful about that marketing campaign and what wasn't successful. So that helps us have measurable results and be able to look apples to apples year over year, or maybe quarter after quarter, or liturgical season after liturgical season. And what this does is it helps us be less nervous about, not enough people signed up for the pasta dinner, so let's post a let's flood Facebook. And I call that silver bullet thinking. There isn't one thing that's going to push your event or your parish over the waterfall and just floodgates. There's only one ice bucket challenge. So we shouldn't, in our marketing and communications, strive to come up with that ALS ice bucket challenge that is just going to bring 20,000 parishioners to our parishes. We need to be comprehensive in our approach. So the great thing about the deliverables grid, and just a few guidelines before you go off and design your own, which I think Flip is going to, in the worksheet, provide you a blank version of that so that you can design your own, and we'll walk through that blank one. Start small. The entire parish doesn't need to deploy this deliverables grid, because you will overwhelm yourself and then it'll get set aside. Start small. Maybe you have a demographic fellowship group or a specific ministry like Legion of Mary that wants to really embrace this approach and share their experiences. It can't be completed alone. So this is the phrase that I use is, it's not like placing an order at a fast food restaurant. You see that there's check boxes on there, but you can't just download a copy, put checks next to everything, and then drop it in my box. It really is a trigger list for conversation. And then lastly, it's actually the final element of the creative brief. So we're not filling it out and then having the conversation. We're having these conversations and trying to be clear, talk about the audience, the medium, and the message before we fill out that deliverables grid. So this deliverables grid helps us think in advance. And in the ideal world, you want to give yourself, I've done the math for us. Sorry, I'll go back. You want to give yourself 3 to 5 weeks to actually run the marketing campaign before your event or your initiative, your fundraiser, anything like that. And plus you need a few weeks to plan. So what does that look like in total? It's a minimum of 6 weeks, an ideal 12 weeks. So Christmas is out the door for us, right? Now, we do have to be realistic. Christmas is not that out the door for St. Monica even. So we're still working on it. But ideally, we need to be having these conversations ahead of time so that we can find volunteers, find people that are experts in these channels, and be able to deploy them. So the goal, the look, and the channels. The deliverables grid really is about the channels. And Dan really focused on the goal. So on the parish level, I kind of wanted to give you some ideas of what it would take to formulate your look. Because when we're talking about building a team, and as a communications director, if I don't have the firsthand experience of being part of the Knights of Columbus, it's going to be really difficult for me to come up with some messaging statements or some imagery that isn't stock footage or some fantastic taglines, some fonts, and put together that entire brand package. So these are expectations that we ask our leaders at St. Monica to prepare that help us get started. Messaging statements. So describe the event in 50 words, but also in 100 words and also 150 words. If you give me 4 paragraphs, but I only have room for 3 sentences, if I choose the wrong 3 sentences, you're going to be quite upset with me. And I understandably, but give me some direction. Images. I know that Dan is not a fan of stock photography. If you need to, you can go to Unsplash or Pixabay, and Flip's going to provide all of these links. These are free, licensed stock photography. It's not okay to go to Google Images and steal someone else's work. The copy, the font, come up with a tagline. So the way John was describing the marriage retreat, I mean, that makes a perfect tagline. And if your communications director is single or doesn't have kids, they're not going to be able to come up with that tagline because they don't know that firsthand. So find somebody that can help you come up with a tagline. And then, of course, put it all together in a brand package. Everything has a different shape and size. Facebook, Instagram, the website, do all of that at one time. Don't come back and forth, because you don't want to keep interrupting and starting up and trying to refocus on your original intention. So Flip will be sending out this deliverables grid, and it's blank. This is for you to fill out. You can change your channels. Maybe, you know, signage, physical signage, you need much more space. Maybe you don't do a lot of events other than Eucharist. Maybe there's this whole mobile sphere of your parish app. Some parishes have a dedicated app rather than a mobile responsive website, or in addition to a mobile responsive website. But notice that the pulpit and the bulletin are just two little dots in both corners. This is where our world and our church lives right now. So I think that's a good place to sort of maybe bounce off and get some individual questions. John?
Yeah, good. And if we're wrapping up here, but if you have any questions for Merrick specific to leading communication at a parish, or even delegating communications at a parish, if you'll just type those in on the Q&A section. And Merrick, thank you for sharing that with us. Yes, you will get an email. Everyone who's registered for this will get an email that will give you the resources that we've talked about. It'll give you a link to that grid that you can fill in yourself, put your own channels in there that you want to use. What I love about what you said is it gives people clarity. If you want your stuff announced, if you want it communicated, here's how you do it. It gives them a timeline, and it allows everyone to get fair treatment based on the rules that you set out. One thing I would emphasize in that interview with your ministries or events or whoever you're talking to is that 50, 100, 150 piece that Merrick shared. Have them communicate to you why they are having the event. Because if they can't communicate it to you, then there's no way you can communicate it to the parish. And giving you a quick blurb, a little bit longer version, and then something bigger, it makes it where you're not having to write about things that you aren't really familiar with, and you can do a better job and help the ministries and the leaders understand that you just want to connect with people the best that you can. So you're asking them to help you do that. Any thoughts on that, Merrick, on getting that vision from them and how you go about that?
It really is a conversation, and once again, it's about connection. So the experience and the story is what is essential, and that's the only way that you're going to get excited about anything. So getting our ministers and our staff and our parishioners to tell their story is what really is essential to them understanding the marketing part of communication.
How do you make that available to people? What are different ways that people in the parish can get access to that grid?
We have an internal page, and it's not hidden or behind any sort of wall, but you can't click it through the menus. But anyone can go to stmonica.net/marcom with one M, M-A-R-C-O-M. And it's just kind of an internal page to remind people the 6 principles of strong parish communications. You can deliver, or you can download the deliverables grid. Where I'm looking to expand it so that you could actually set appointment times with your staff person to discuss your event. It also provides a lot of content resources. So if you are going to be working on your own, here are some really great platforms, fonts, stock imagery, where you can do your own design. Products like Adobe Spark, Crello, Canva, I know is very, very popular, but maybe you don't have Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator skills. These are platforms that are free and or low cost that are really, really powerful and deployable.
Yeah, Canva is a great platform for creating social media posts, for creating visuals, and you can set up your page there with where you can let other people have access to it, and you set up the color schemes, you set up the fonts, you show them the images that they can use, and it really gives people a palette to choose from where they're not just out there on their own choosing anything. Merrick, we're running out of time, but how could people contact you if they have any questions?
Anyone can contact me at stmonica.net or Merrick at stmonica.net. I'm sure that my information will be included in the handout. But if you go to stmonica.net, you can bounce around our website a little bit. You can go to that internal page, stmonica.net/marcom, and my name and phone number and email address is at the top of that page as well.
Awesome. Well, before we thank you so much for being with us, Merrick, and thank you for sharing the hard work that you've done with all of us and other parishes, that's saving them a lot of work. Really appreciate it. Before we take off here, I want to share with you about, this is our last webinar of the year, but in January we have another one coming up on millennials and the next gen. And I just spoke in Minneapolis with the Catholic Family Foundation on this. We're going to be talking about who are millennials, who are they really, what do they really think about the church, and how can we better connect with millennials in the next gen and help them connect with the church and with our local parishes. How can we do that in a better way? So thank you so much for being with us today. You will be getting an email in the next 24 hours with links to all the information that we talked about and a special worksheet that you can use with your parish to help provide better communication that inspires more than just informs. Thanks for being with us.